Jordan hit the ground hard, gravel biting into his palms as Richard Hale's hand closed around his collar and yanked him up. "I told you to stay away from my son." Richard's voice cracked across the park like a whip. A few joggers slowed, watching. A mother pulled her toddler closer. Richard didn't care. His face was red, his tie loosened from the drive over, his knuckles white against the boy's thin jacket. "Dad, stop!" Tyler screamed, sprinting from the swings, his sneakers kicking up dust. "Let him go, he didn't do anything." Jordan didn't fight back. He didn't cry out. He just looked Richard dead in the eyes, and in a voice far too steady for a 10-year-old boy who lived under a bridge, he said, "You don't even remember my dad's name, do you?" Richard froze. "What did you say?" "My dad, Daniel Reyes. He worked construction on your Riverside site. Fell 3 stories because the scaffolding wasn't inspected. You signed off on the paperwork that said it was." The grip on Jordan's collar loosened. Richard's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in years, the most powerful man in 3 boardrooms had absolutely nothing to say. 3 weeks earlier, none of this would have made any sense to him at all. Richard Hale had built his empire out of nothing. Foreclosed lots turned into gleaming towers. Failing companies bought for pennies and sold for millions. He wore success like armor. Every handshake was a transaction. Every smile calculated. And at home, his son Tyler had learned to live inside that same armor, quiet, obedient, and desperately lonely. Tyler didn't have real friends. He had classmates whose parents wanted something from Richard. He had a nanny who clocked out at 6. He had a father who measured love in private school tuition and unread bedtime stories. So when Tyler wandered off from his driver one afternoon near Lincoln Park, chasing a stray soccer ball that rolled past a cluster of trees, and found a boy his own age sitting on a broken bench sharpening a stick into a whistle, something in him lit up that hadn't in a long time. "That's a cool trick," Tyler said, breathless. The boy looked up, wary at first. "You're gonna get grass stains on those shoes," he said, nodding at Tyler's spotless white sneakers. "They look expensive." Tyler laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in months. "They're my dad's favorite brand. He'd probably buy me 10 more if I ruined these." The boy's eyebrows rose. "Must be nice." "I'm Tyler. Jordan." That was how it started. No introductions arranged by assistants, no supervised playdates. Just 2 boys and a broken park bench, and somehow, within an hour, Tyler had learned more about resourcefulness, patience, and quiet dignity than he had in 10 years of private tutors. Jordan showed him how to fix a bent bike chain with nothing but a twig and patience. He showed him which vendor gave out day-old bread for free if you asked kindly instead of desperately. He never once asked Tyler for money. In fact, when Tyler pulled out a crumpled $20 bill from his pocket one afternoon and pushed it toward him, Jordan just shook his head. "Keep it," Jordan said. "Why not? You could use it." "Because the second I take your money, I'm not your friend anymore. I'm just another person taking from you." Jordan tossed a pebble into the pond, watching the ripples stretch outward. "I've got enough people looking at me like that already." Tyler didn't understand it then, not fully, but something's about those words stuck with him the rest of the week. He started sneaking away more often. A study hour here, a walk before dinner. There. Every lie, small enough not to raise suspicion, every minute with Jordan worth the risk. But lies don't stay small forever. It was Richard's driver, Marcus Webb, who first noticed the pattern. Tyler asking to be dropped 2 blocks early, insisting on walking the rest of the way for exercise. When Marcus mentioned it casually over dinner one night, Richard barely looked up from his phone. "Probably just being a kid," Richard muttered. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and men like Richard Hale did not tolerate unanswered questions for long. 2 days later, Richard cancelled a meeting, something he never did, and had his assistant quietly reroute to Tyler's driver. He wanted to see for himself. What he saw stopped him cold. His son. Laughing. Actually laughing. The kind of laugh Richard hadn't heard since Tyler's mother passed 3 years ago. And beside him, sitting on a bench that looked like it hadn't been repaired since the 90s, was a boy in a torn jacket 2 sizes too big, his sneakers held together with duct tape, his hair unwashed and matted beneath a faded baseball cap. Richard didn't approach. Not yet. He watched from the car, his jaw tightening with every passing second, his mind already spinning a story he was certain was true. That kid's working an angle, probably going to ask Tyler for money, or worse, figure out who we are and try something. He had seen it before, people smelling money on his family and circling like vultures. He wasn't about to let his son become someone's meal ticket. That night, he confronted Tyler the moment he walked through the door. "Who is he?" Tyler's face went pale. "Who? Don't play games with me. The boy in the park. The one in the dirty jacket. His name is Jordan. He's my friend." "He is not your friend." Richard's voice was low, controlled, the way it got right before he fired someone. "That boy is homeless, Tyler. Do you understand what that means? He has nothing. And people who have nothing will do anything to get something, especially from a family like ours." "That's not true. Jordan doesn't even want my money. He told me to keep it." "That's exactly what someone smart enough to know better would say." Richard crossed his arms. "This friendship ends now. I don't want you anywhere near that boy again." "Dad, please." "I said no, Tyler." Richard's voice cracked through the house, sharper than he meant it to be. Tyler flinched. For a moment, something like regret flickered across Richard's face, but pride buried it fast. "This conversation is over." Tyler ran upstairs, slamming his bedroom door hard enough to rattle the frame. Richard stood alone in the hallway, breathing hard, telling himself he'd done the right thing, the responsible thing, the thing a good father does. He didn't yet know how wrong he was, because 2 days later, against every rule, every threat, every ounce of his father's fury, Tyler slipped out again. And this time, Richard followed. If you're feeling the tension building already, hit that like button right now. Trust me, it's about to get a whole lot more emotional. And if you're new here, subscribe, because you do not want to miss where this story goes next. Richard parked half a block from the park, engine still running, watching his son cross the grass toward that same battered bench. Jordan was already there, waiting, a small paper bag of bread in his hands, clearly saved for someone even hungrier than himself. Something about the sight cracked something loose in Richard's chest, not sympathy, not yet, but confusion. This didn't look like a con, it looked like two kids just being kids. But pride is a stubborn thing, and stubborn men rarely let go of their convictions without a fight. Richard stepped out of the car, slammed the door, and began walking toward them with the kind of fury that made grown employees clear out of conference rooms. "Tyler, get in the car. Now." Tyler's whole body went rigid. "Dad, I said now." Jordan stood slowly, positioning himself slightly in front of Tyler. Not aggressive, just steady, like he'd learned a long time ago how to make himself a shield. "Sir, we're not doing anything wrong. I told you to stay away from my son." "With respect, sir, that's Tyler's choice to make, not just yours." Something about the calm in Jordan's voice, the sheer audacity of a homeless 10-year-old speaking to him like an equal, sent Richard over the edge. He grabbed the boy by the collar. "You have no idea who you're talking to." And that's when Jordan said it. The words that would unravel everything Richard thought he knew about his company, his father's legacy, and himself. "I know exactly who you are. You're the man who signed the paperwork that said the scaffolding on your Riverside site was safe. My dad believed you. He trusted that paperwork with his life. Now he can't walk without a cane, and my mum works 3 jobs just so my sister can afford her medicine, and I sleep under a bridge so they have one less mouth to feed." The park went silent. Even the wind seemed to still. "My dad's name is Daniel Reyes," Jordan said, his voice trembling now, not from fear, but from years of held-back grief finally breaking loose. "Does that name mean anything to you? Or was he just another number in your reports?" Richard's hand fell away from Jordan's collar, like it had been burned. He stood there, the most powerful man in the room, in the city, in his own son's eyes, utterly speechless, staring into the face of a boy whose entire life had been shattered by a decision Richard didn't even remember making. "Reyes," Richard whispered, the name tasting foreign and yet horribly familiar on his tongue. "Daniel Reyes." Tyler looked between his father and his best friend, tears welling in his eyes, waiting, praying, for his father to say something, anything, that would make this right. But for the first time in his adult life, Richard Hale had no idea what to say at all. Richard didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his study long after Tyler had gone to bed, the name echoing over and over in his mind. Daniel Reyes. Daniel Reyes. He poured himself a drink he never touched, staring at the framed photo on his desk. His late father, shaking hands with construction workers at the groundbreaking of Hale Enterprises' very first project. His father used to say, "Never forget the hands that build what you sell, Richard. A company's soul lives in the people who show up before the sun does." Richard had forgotten. Somewhere between the mergers and the quarterly reports and the private jets, he had forgotten. Completely. At 2 a.m, he called his head of legal, Deborah Klein, and told her to pull every file connected to the Riverside site incident from 4 years ago. She hesitated. "Richard, it's the middle of the night. I don't care what time it is. I want that file on my desk by 6 a.m. By dawn, Richard sat hunched over his kitchen table, coffee growing cold beside him, flipping through pages he barely remembered signing. An incident report, a workers' compensation claim, a settlement offer, small, quiet, designed to make the problem disappear without drawing attention. And buried at the bottom, a note from the site supervisor flagging the scaffolding as non-compliant, awaiting inspection, dated 2 days before the accident. Richard's hands started shaking. "They knew," he whispered to the empty kitchen. "They knew, and they let him work anyway." He thought about his signature on that settlement, signature he'd scrawled between 2 meetings without reading a single line, trusting his legal team to handle it, trusting the system he himself had built. A man was crippled, a family was destroyed, and Richard Hale had signed off on it without so much as a second glance. He found Tyler in the kitchen an hour later, eating cereal in silence, refusing to meet his father's eyes. "Tyler, I don't want to talk about it, Dad. Tyler, please, I need to ask you something." Richard sat down across from him, his voice softer than Tyler had heard in years. "Where does Jordan live? Really live?" Tyler's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. He studied his father's face, searching for the anger from the night before, but found something else instead, something that looked almost like fear. "Under the overpass on 5th Street, Tyler said quietly, "with his mom and his little sister. His dad's there too sometimes when the shelter's full." Richard closed his eyes. "Get your shoes," he said. "What?" "Get your shoes, Tyler. We're going to see them." Tyler stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're not going to yell at him again, or call the police?" "No," Richard said, and for the first time his voice cracked. "I'm going to apologize." The drive to 5th Street felt like it took an hour, though it was barely 15 minutes. Richard's polished sedan looked wildly out of place, pulling up beside the underpass, past shopping carts filled with blankets, past makeshift tents held together with tarp and rope. Tyler led the way without hesitation, weaving through the small community like he'd done it 100 times before, calling out, "Jordan! Jordan! It's me!" Jordan emerged from behind a stack of cardboard, wiping his hands on his jeans, his expression hardening the moment he saw Richard step out of the car behind Tyler. "What is he doing here?" Jordan asked, stepping protectively toward a small tent where a little girl's face peeked out, thin, pale, maybe 6 years old, watching everything with enormous eyes. "I asked him to bring me," Richard said before Tyler could answer. His voice trembled in a way it never had in a boardroom. "Jordan, I need to speak with your father, please." "Why?" "So you can threaten him too? Finish the job you started 4 years ago?" "No." Richard's jaw tightened, fighting to hold himself together. "So I can apologize to him, and to you, and to your whole family." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of traffic overhead. A man's voice called out from inside the tent, hoarse but steady. "Jordan, who's out there?" Jordan hesitated, then stepped aside. Daniel Reyes emerged slowly, leaning heavily on a cane, his left leg dragging slightly with every step. He was younger than Richard expected, maybe 40, but his face carried the weight of a man twice that age. When he saw Richard standing there in his tailored coat, something flickered across his expression. Recognition. And underneath it, a wound that had never fully closed. "Mr. Hale," Daniel said, his voice flat. "Been a long time." "Daniel." Richard's throat tightened around the name. I didn't know." about any of this. I swear to you, I didn't know what happened to you after the accident. You signed the settlement, Daniel said quietly. Your name's right there on the paperwork my lawyer showed me. Guess you didn't read it either. The accusation landed like a blow, because it was true, and Richard had no defense against the truth. You're right, Richard said. I didn't read it. I trusted people I shouldn't have trusted, and I let a family fall apart because I was too busy chasing the next deal to check if the man building it was safe. His voice broke completely now. I am so sorry, Daniel. I know sorry doesn't fix your leg, or get back the years you lost, or give your daughter the childhood she deserves. But I am not going to let this stand another day. Daniel studied him for a long moment, his eyes hard, guarded, unwilling to trust so easily. People like you say things like that all the time, Mr. Harley. Then you go back to your mansion and forget we exist by morning. Then hold me to it, Richard said. Give me the chance to prove I mean it. Little Maya peeked further out of the tent, clutching a stuffed rabbit missing one ear, staring at Richard with the same steady, unflinching eyes as her brother. Are you the bad man Jordan told us about? She asked, in a small voice. The words hit Richard harder than anything Daniel had said. He crouched down slowly, meeting the little girl at eye level, his composure fully gone now, tears he hadn't cried in years threatening to spill. I was, Rickard said softly, but I don't want to be anymore. Can I try to fix that? Maya looked at her brother, silently asking permission. Jordan's jaw was tight, his arms crossed, still guarded, but something in his eyes had softened, just slightly, watching the most powerful man he'd ever met kneel in the dirt in front of his baby sister. You really mean it? Jordan asked. You're not just saying that because you feel guilty. I mean every word, Richard said, standing back up, looking between Jordan, Daniel and Maya. Tomorrow morning, I'm calling my legal team. I'm reopening your case, Daniel. Full medical coverage, back pay for everything you should have received, and I'm personally overseeing a full safety review of every site my company operates. No more buried reports, no more forgotten names. And what about them? Daniel asked, nodding toward the tent, the blankets, the cardboard walls that made up his family's entire world. What about right now? Medical bills and back pay take time, Mr. Hale. My daughter's sick tonight. Richard didn't hesitate. Then tonight, you're coming with me. Jordan stiffened. We don't need your charity. It's not charity, Richard said firmly. It's what should have happened 4 years ago. Let me do this, please. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Daniel looked down at his daughter, small and shivering despite the summer heat, her cheeks flushed with fever, and something in him broke. Okay, Daniel said quietly. For her, not for me. For her. That night, for the first time in over a year, Jordan's family slept somewhere warm. We are far from done, and trust me, what happens next will absolutely wreck you in the best way. If you're feeling this story in your chest right now, tap that like button and leave a comment with just one word describing how you feel. Subscribe if you haven't yet. The guest house behind the Hale estate hadn't been used in years. Richard's late wife used to call it her painting studio, back when laughter still lived in that house. Now it held 2 queen beds, a fresh coat of paint, and a family who hadn't slept somewhere safe in over a year. Maya's fever broke by morning. The estate doctor Richard called in the middle of the night diagnosed a bad chest infection. Nothing that wouldn't heal with proper rest, food and medicine, the very things her family hadn't been able to afford. She woke up the next morning wrapped in blankets, staring at the ceiling fans spinning lazily above her, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. Jordan, she whispered, shaking her brother awake in the bed beside hers. Is this a dream? No, Maya, Jordan said, though even he sounded unsure. I don't think it is. Downstairs, Richard hadn't slept either. He sat at his kitchen island, laptop open, 3 separate calls already made before 7 a.m. His legal team had been summoned for an emergency meeting. His head of construction safety had been ordered to pull every compliance record from every active site. And Deborah Klein, still in her pajamas on a video call, stared at him like she didn't recognize her boss. Richard, you understand what you're asking, right? She said. Reopening the Reyes case means admitting fault publicly. That's not a quiet settlement anymore, that's headlines. That's a hit to the stock. The board is going to lose their minds. Let them lose their minds, Richard said. I've spent 4 years pretending a man's shattered leg was a lines item. I'm done pretending. And if the board pushes back, if they try to remove you? Richard leaned back, and for the first time in the conversation, he almost smiled, not out of amusement, but out of clarity. Then they remove me, but I am not signing another paper that buries someone else's pain to protect our numbers. Not ever again. Deborah was quiet for a long moment. Okay, she finally said. I'll draft the statement, but Richard, this is going to get loud. She wasn't wrong. By that afternoon, word had leaked, likely from someone on the safety team, that Hale Enterprises was reopening a 4-year-old injury case tied to falsified inspection records. Reporters called. Richard's phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from board members demanding an explanation. His head of communications begged him to spin it, soften it, bury it in corporate language. Richard refused every single suggestion. Instead, he sat in front of a single camera in his home office that evening, no script, no teleprompter, just the truth. 4 years ago, a worker named Daniel Reyes was critically injured on one of my company's construction sites, Richard said, his voice steady despite the storm building inside him. The scaffolding that failed had been flagged as unsafe 2 days prior. That report was buried. I signed a settlement without verifying the truth behind it, and a family was left to rebuild their entire life with almost nothing. That failure is mine, not my legal team's, not my site supervisor's, mine. He paused, glancing briefly at something off camera, a framed photo of his father shaking hands with construction workers, the same photo that had haunted him all night. Starting today, Hale Enterprises will fully cover Daniel Reyes's ongoing medical care, provide full back compensation, and undergo an independent safety audit across every active site. This isn't about protecting my company's image, it's about finally doing what should have been done 4 years ago. The video went out that night. By morning, it had over 2 million views. Reaction poured in fast, some praising Richard's honesty, some accusing him of a calculated PR stunt, some digging for cracks in the story. But none of that mattered to Richard nearly as much as one single moment that happened later that same morning. He found Daniel sitting alone on the back porch of the guest house, staring out at the manicured lawn, his cane resting against the railing beside him. You didn't have to go public, Daniel said without turning around. You could have just paid us quietly and moved on. No one would have known. I would have known, Richard said, sitting down beside him. And so would you. And that's exactly the kind of quiet I built my whole career on. I'm done with it. Daniel was silent for a long moment. 4 years ago, right after the accident, I used to imagine what I'd say to you if I ever got the chance. I had this whole speech about how you ruined my life without even knowing my name. He shook his head slowly. Didn't think it would happen because my son dragged your son to a park bench. Neither did I, Richard admitted. Jordan's the one who saved this family, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. Not me, not his mother, working 3 jobs till she could barely stand. Him, a 10-year-old boy carrying weight no kid should ever have to carry. He looked at Richard directly now. You almost took away the one good thing he had. His friendship with your son. Richard's throat tightened. I know, and I am sorrier for that than almost anything. He forgives easier than I do, Daniel said. Give him time. Give all of us time. But don't mistake this. He gestured toward the guest house, the doctor's visit, the fresh sheets on the beds. For forgiveness. It's a start, not an ending. That's fair, Richard said. That's more than fair. Inside, Tyler and Jordan sat cross-legged on Tyler's bedroom floor, a chessboard between them that Jordan was steadily, mercilessly winning. You're just going easy on me, Tyler said, only half joking as Jordan took his second rook in 10 minutes. Nah, Jordan said, smirking. You're just bad at this. Tyler laughed, and then, unexpectedly, his eyes welled up. Jordan glanced up, concerned. Whoa, hey, what's wrong? Nothing, Tyler said, wiping his face quickly. It's just, I've never had a friend stick around through something like this. Most kids at my school would have bailed the second my dad yelled at them. You didn't even flinch. Jordan considered that for a moment. I've had way worse than your dad yelling at me, Tyler. What almost broke me wasn't him. It was thinking I was gonna lose you over it. You're not losing me, Tyler said fiercely. Not ever. Best friend, remember? Jordan managed a small smile, the first real one Tyler had seen from him in days. Yeah, best friends. Downstairs, Richard stood in the hallway, watching the two boys through the cracked bedroom door, listening to that exchange he was never meant to hear. He thought about his own father, about the lesson he'd forgotten for far too many years, and made a silent promise standing right there in that hallway that whatever happened next, with the board, with the press, with his company's reputation, he would never again let a person become a number, a name, buried in paperwork he was too busy to read. But the storm wasn't over yet. 3 days later, the board called an emergency vote. Richard stood in a glass conference room surrounded by men and women who had built their fortunes on the same quiet image-first philosophy Richard had followed his entire career, and watched as they debated whether his public confession had done irreparable damage to shareholder value. You've cost this company an estimated $40 million in market value in 72 hours, one board member snapped. For what, a guilty conscience? For doing the right thing, Richard said calmly. Something this company forgot how to do a long time ago, myself included. Sentiment doesn't pay dividends, Richard. No, Richard agreed, but it's the only thing that lets me sleep at night. And frankly, if this board can't understand the difference between protecting profits and protecting people, then maybe I'm not the only one who needs to change. The room fell silent. If your heart is racing right now, you are exactly where you need to be. Go ahead and smash that like button, drop a comment telling me if you think the board is going to side with Richard or turn against him. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's the time, because the final part of this story is about to bring everything full circle. The vote came down to a single tally. Richard stood at the head of the table, watching hands rise one by one, some slow, reluctant, others immediate. 6 votes to retain him, 5 to remove him. It was closer than he'd ever imagined it could be, closer than his own confidence, and for one long suspended second, Richard genuinely believed he might walk out of that room without a company to his name. Then the chairman, an older man named Thomas Whitfield, who had sat on Hale Enterprises board since Richard's father first built the company, cleared his throat. I haven't voted yet, Thomas said. The room turned toward him. Richard held his breath. I knew your father, Richard, Thomas said slowly. He used to tell me that a business built on people forgetting who they stepped on to get there wasn't a business worth building. I watched this company drift from that idea for years. I let it happen. I said nothing. He looked directly at Richard. What you did this week, the confession, the accountability, all of it, that's the closest this company has come to your father's original vision in over a decade. My vote is to retain you. Not because it's safe, because it's right. The room shifted. One more hand went up in Richard's favour. 7-5. Richard kept his company, but something had changed in him that no vote could measure. Walking out of that boardroom, he didn't feel triumphant. He felt something closer to relief, the relief of a man who had nearly lost himself and had been given, against every odd, a second chance to become someone worth being. He drove straight home that afternoon, skipping 3 scheduled calls, something his assistant had never seen him do in 12 years of working for him. He found Tyler and Jordan in the backyard, along with Maya, who had colour back in her cheeks, an energy Richard hadn't seen in her before, chasing the boys with a soccer ball nearly as big as she was, shrieking with laughter every time she stole it away from them. Daniel sat on the porch steps, watching, his cane resting beside him, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth for what Richard suspected was the first time in years. Board let you keep your empire? Daniel asked as Richard approached. Barely, Richard admitted, sitting down beside him. 1 vote. Was it worth it? Richard watched Tyler tackle Jordan into the grass, both boys laughing so hard they could barely breathe, Maya piling on top of them in a heap of limbs and giggles. Yeah, Richard said quietly. It was worth it. Over the following weeks, the story that had started with a shove in a park became something far bigger than either family could have predicted. Richard didn't just pay for Daniel's medical care and back wages. He created a foundation in his father's name, dedicated to worker safety accountability, with Daniel himself hired on as a paid consultant, someone who understood better than anyone what happens when corners get cut and reports get buried. Jordan's mother, Elena, who had been working 3 exhausting jobs just to keep her family fed, was offered a stable position managing operations at one of Hale Enterprises' community outreach centers, real work, real pay. Not a handout, exactly the way Daniel had insisted it needed to be. And Jordan and Maya were enrolled at Tyler's school, tuition fully covered, not as charity, but as restitution, a word Richard now used carefully and meant completely. It wasn't easy at first. Jordan struggled adjusting to a classroom after years of teaching himself how to survive on the street. Some kids whispered, some parents raised eyebrows at pickup, unsure what to make of the boy who used to live under a bridge now walking the same polished hallways as their children. But Jordan had survived worse than whispers, and every single day, Tyler sat beside him at lunch, loud and unbothered by anyone's opinion, daring anyone to say something about his best friend. Nobody ever did, not after the first week when Tyler stood up in front of the entire 5th grade. During a class presentation and told Jordan's story himself, unprompted, voice shaking but steady, ending with the words, "My best friend taught me more about being a good person in 3 weeks than I learned in 10 years of everything I thought mattered. Money doesn't make you rich. Being someone worth trusting does." The classroom had gone completely silent. Then, slowly, kids began to clap. Richard heard about that moment from the school later that day. And when Tyler came home, his father was standing in the doorway, waiting for him, uncharacteristically emotional, pulling his son into a hug tight enough to nearly lift him off the ground. "I heard what you said today," Richard said, his voice thick. "Are you mad? Some of the parents were talking about it in the group chat." "Mad?" Richard pulled back, looking his son directly in the eyes. "Tyler, I have never in my entire life been more proud of anyone. You understood something at 10 years old that took me over 40 years, and one very difficult week to learn." 6 months later, the guest house behind the Hale estate had a new coat of paint, filled now not with borrowed furniture, but with things the Reyes family had chosen themselves. Elena's paintings on the walls, Maya's stuffed animals piled on her bed, Daniel's old work boots by the door, no longer needed for construction, but kept as a quiet reminder of everything they'd survived. Daniel walked without his cane most days now. After months of physical therapy, Richard's company covered in full. He still worked with the Safety Foundation, still spoke at company trainings about what happens when profit gets prioritized over people, his voice carrying a weight and authority that no consultant with a fancy degree could ever replicate. Jordan and Tyler were by every account inseparable, the kind of friendship that had somehow survived being forbidden, survived a furious confrontation in a public park, and come out unbreakable on the other side. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the Hale estate, Richard found the boys sitting on the back porch steps, exactly where Daniel used to sit those first few weeks, watching Maya chase fireflies across the lawn. "Can I sit?" Richard asked. "It's your porch, Dad," Tyler said, scooting over anyway. Richard sat down between them, quiet for a long moment, watching Maya's small silhouette darting through the fading light. "You know," Richard said finally, "the day I grabbed you in that park, Jordan, I was so certain I was protecting my son. I thought I understood exactly what kind of person you were before I even gave you a chance to show me." "I know," Jordan said simply. No bitterness in his voice anymore, just quiet understanding. "I was wrong about almost everything that mattered," Richard continued, "but I've never been more grateful to be wrong about anything in my entire life." Jordan looked at him, something unguarded finally settling into his expression, not quite forgiveness completed, but forgiveness beginning, taking root the way real trust always does, slowly and on its own time. "My dad always told me people can change," Jordan said. "I just didn't think I'd get to watch it happen with someone like you." Richard felt his throat tighten, and for once he didn't try to hide it. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for not giving up on my son, and for not giving up on me even when I gave you every reason to." The three of them sat there together as darkness settled fully over the yard, Maya's laughter still echoing faintly in the distance, fireflies blinking on and off like tiny lanterns guiding her through the grass. A millionaire, a boy who once had nothing, and a son who had somehow taught them both what mattered most. Because in the end, it was never about the money Richard had built his entire identity around. It was about a homeless boy who refused to take a $20 bill, who chose integrity over easy answers, who spoke one honest sentence in a park that shattered every wall a millionaire had spent his whole life building. And sometimes, that's exactly what it takes, one honest voice. Brave enough to speak the truth to someone powerful enough to finally listen. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me, putting it together, do not scroll away without hitting that like button. It genuinely helps this story reach more people who need it. Drop a comment below and tell me which moment hit you hardest. Whether it was Jordan's words in the park, Richard's confession on camera, or Tyler standing up for his best friend in front of his entire class. And if you haven't already, subscribe right now because more stories just like this one are coming and you will not want to miss what's next. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. See you in the next story.